Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Knight from RICS and welcome to this RICS Tech Partner Programme a discussion with one of our tech partners, Sidedoor, with Charles Thackray. A little bit of an introduction from my side. I've been working with RICS for over 10 years now and now work within our standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the business. And I lead our Tech Partner Programme, our community of tech firms right across the built environment and bring to life how data and technology is revolutionizing and bringing huge opportunities to the built environment. So I'd like to introduce and bring online Charles Thackray from Sidedoor. Charles, welcome.
Hi, Andrew. Hi,
Great to have
nice
you on the call.
nice to meet you.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to kick off, having introduced myself, I'd love to hear really about Sidedoor, who and why set it up, and particularly your backstory and your colleagues' backstory in terms of your skills and experience. So let us know who you are and what you're about, Charles.
No, indeed. Thank you for your time, and it's good to kind of chat about Sidedoor, but also just broader topics across the industry, actually. So yeah, my background is quite mixed. I suppose my background is a mix of banking, a bit of medical, and predominantly property being a theme through that for the last 25 years. So originally my background is actually property development, so I suppose I come at the industry from a consumer perspective. And that's been set up since sort of the early noughties, and that's a sort of development company up north. And you know, in between that, I worked in finance in London as well. It was probably, if I think back, around sort of mid 2015, 2016, I was doing from a consumer's perspective, a lot of sort of development on the property side up here up north. And my interaction then was a lot with different surveyors, both actually on the commercial side and on the residential side. And I was getting to sort of understand the industry a bit more in the fact that I was sort of interacting with it with new purchasers. And it was just, I found, I think from my perspective, it was just trickier than I was imagining it would be to understand what type of surveys I should be purchasing for different types of property, and also where to go and how to find the right surveyor who has the right availability, who to speak to. Generally, the introducers I was working with didn't necessarily have the right partnerships or relationships to do those introductions. So a lot of it I felt was sort of left up to me. And that's also someone who worked in the industry. And I was still finding it difficult to get a grasp of it. And so it sort of sparked from there, actually, about, you know, is this common practice across the UK? Is this just because I'm doing it the wrong way? Is this something that other consumers don't have a problem with? And actually, my first interaction was with RICS. I didn't want to begin a company or begin spending my time developing something that actually was going to change inherently within RICS or bring something in or create a marketplace that wasn't needed. So actually, right at the start, I'm thinking back in 2016, I sort of came down to London, opposite Big Ben, went to your offices there and sat down with some very helpful guys from RICS, and I got a bit more understanding from RICS's perspective, how they saw the industry, why they saw that, because the big stumbling block for me also when I sort of dipped my toe in was understanding that actually only 25% of residential purchases, give or take every year, but around 25% involve a survey. And it was just understanding why the percentages were so low for people instructing a surveyor to come and visit the property, look at the condition of the property. And you know, yet 75% of people were electing not to do that. And I try to understand, is that by choice, or is that through possibly lack of knowledge? Mm-hmm. And sitting down with RICS, got a good understanding that actually a lot of it is misinformation, that actually people don't necessarily realize that actually a valuation survey represents the bank's interests. And actually, you know, in many cases, the surveyors aren't actually visiting the property, and it's done remotely. So from that, got a sort of understanding that one of the key indicators was misunderstanding and misinformation to the consumers and customers out there, and looked at ways that Sidedoor could improve that. Got an understanding from RICS that it wasn't something that it was being created in-house, because obviously it couldn't be done in-house. And yeah, it sort of began, without getting into sort of the nitty-gritty detail, it began from there.
Yeah.
And actually we got involved with the market, got involved with you know, obviously the best people to actually really get to know it is flip it on the other side, and actually then worked with quite a lot of surveyors that I know. So came at it from the surveyor's perspective as well as the consumer's perspective, trying to understand what it was that both felt there were bottlenecks and problems in the industry, and if I and subsequently then what led on to Sidedoor could improve that for both sides, how we would go about it. So I think we sort of formally formed Sidedoor in 2017, but then, you know, it took a good year to actually bring it to market, which was into sort of 2018 when Sidedoor was sort of formally launched. And you know, initially we were sort of direct to consumer, so that we were a lot of sort of I think organic traffic, PPC traffic, and a lot of it was helping helping the customers understand why they'd want a surveyor, how they could go about finding a surveyor. We built up a good network across the UK of larger, medium, and local surveyors, so across the board. And we sort of ran that business and had reasonable success, and I can be honest with that, and learned a lot, I would say, through back end of 2018 into 2019, but really got the understanding that I think a lot of people use online in respect to surveyors to research information, and don't necessarily go through direct to a surveyor. And I think our mistake, and I can say mistake in that side of things, was that from that we understood that the best way is actually putting the customer directly onto the surveyor as soon as possible, because they've got questions they need answering. And you know, going via an online platform and help and advice is great, and we have a lot of helpful tidbits of information to help aid the consumer in both longer articles and smaller articles, and write-ups to help aid them. But at the end of it, they're going to want to talk to a surveyor, and they're going to want to talk quite frankly about what they should be getting, and having the confidence that that surveyor is RICS qualified to give them the right advice. And yeah, so from that we actually made the decision, rather difficultly, going into early 2020, which is obviously a pretty difficult time for everyone. As everyone was exiting London, and we were sort of in the middle of doing a pretty major transformation of the company. But we went ahead with it anyway, and actually in the end we're able to work remotely as we still are doing now across the UK, and change Sidedoor from a actually direct consumer business to a B2B business, and that sort of brings us into, I think, what the topics of what we have today to discuss, which is, you know, we realize that actually, how is the best way after a sort of good year, what's the best way that we can get our surveyors the best customers, the best work, and at the same time give the customers the best service, the best journey, should we say, and at least an informed journey, so they can elect to bring in a surveyor or not, but at least they're making an informed decision on that. And you know, we realized from our data on 2018 and 2019 that the best way for us to do that was a B2B business, and actually for us to build relationships out, particularly with digital conveyancing companies, because we'd seen that digital conveyancing, I think, was truthfully ahead of surveying in regards to a digital revolution, should we say. And even if you look in sort of recent years, they have dramatically changed from the traditional solicitor route, conveyancing route, to actually emergence of really large, efficient digital conveyancing companies online, where they can be based anywhere across the UK. The customer can have a digital journey to access their property. It is one of the cogs that it is a necessity to a property purchase. And because of it being a necessity, and because of it being online, and because of Sidedoor being a digital comparison site for surveyors across the UK, we can build our APIs into those companies so that we are one of the services that they get introduced to. We also decided that the best route for us to sort of build a company around was actually something. You see there, I said at the start I wouldn't go into too much detail. I've non-stop spoken for 10 minutes.
Well, I suppose, Charles, if we almost wind back a bit in that sense, I'm interested. I mean, I have a particular interest because one of my roles here at RICS is obviously working with a lot of external stakeholders. I sit on the HM Land Registry Advisory Council, and clearly this whole digitisation of conveyancing is a hugely live area at the moment, and that obviously HM Land Registry have their Digital Street initiative as well. So I'm almost keen to understand from your perspective of the market, which gives us some real insight, what is this kind of past, present, future for the conveyancing process as it becomes more digital? For our listeners, what does digital conveyancing actually mean? And you know, to give us your perspective of how we define that term almost.
I mean, it's a tricky one to answer, and it's sort of the crystal ball answer of everything. It's very difficult to see the future, and in many ways, you know, it'd be interesting. I know on the platform that some of our partners are digital conveyancing companies, and it'd be interesting to hear from their perspective how they perceive the industry directly. But I mean, definitely from our interaction with digital conveyancing companies, I would say, how have we seen the journey transform, or how are we seeing the past, present, and future? And I think even within my lifetime, both from a business perspective and a personal perspective, you know, I remember purchasing properties using local solicitors, you know, and actually I do remember the very first purchases that I was doing of property down south. I was using my solicitors based up here in North Yorkshire, actually, and it was not the norm. And I remember doing that, and people were shocked when they were sort of introducing buying property. Oh, well, that they're based up in Ripon, North Yorkshire. You know, and it was, you know, but it was definitely a traditional way of doing it, you know, and to the point that, you know, it was the revolution of, let's be honest, emails and the internet that sort of began and even then, a lot of the paperwork was done by post and recorded mail and signatures and sending it back and forth. So I think definitely the past, when we reflect on it, is obviously paper-based local relationships, and that, look, to an extent that will always continue depending on where you're buying in the market. You know, you're going to have people that would choose direct contact over a digital relationship, but, you know, let's be honest, looking at the age group and everything changing, majority by far is going to be digital interface, as it already is, to be honest. So I think that, you know, reflecting the past, it is, you know, local relationships, local solicitors, local conveyancing companies, you know, traditional way of speaking, of telephones and paper, and the emergence of, Christ, I remember faxes and email. But, you know, quite if you reflect on it, it is quite an untransparent way of doing it. And what I mean by that is transparency is key to the property market, in my opinion and in Sidedoor's opinion. And what I mean by that is, for a more efficient and a quicker purchase and sale of properties within the UK, transparency to the buyer, to the seller, is key. And having a digital journey on both sides of that, from the main staple that the customer is going to interact with, which is bar the estate agent, the main staple that they have to work with is a conveyancing. So you've got an inroad there where the customer will interact with them. And if everything can stem from that, and the two parties digitally are able to see where they are on the journey. Well, truthfully, you can see much further back in the journey if it's pending, possibly pending a chain. And I know there are a few companies out there. I think one being View My Chain actually was that allow the ability to really, with this digital kind of journey that the customer's on, you have the expanse of being able to really get a lot more information of what could hold up that sale, that purchase. And you know, we obviously know, you know, surveying will always really be a physical surveyor going into view of property to see the condition. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that can't plug in the same way into this digital journey, which I know from our perspective, you know, we see conveyancing as the linchpin, shall we say, that directs us directly, builds our relationship directly with the customer. Absolutely, absolutely. And so, sorry, to bring back to your question, it's so where are we now? And I would say that, you know, conveyancing from our perspective, it's the build out of that digital journey, and you can look at both partners that are on the program with RICS and just, you know, online. You can see the emergence of really successful, really good digital conveyancing companies that are getting, you know, serious numbers of the market. I mean, I know of one off the hand, and I won't mention their name, but I think their business was in excess of 10% of probably numbers last year, and that's just one company. It's a very big one. But you know, it's you know, we're talking serious numbers, and the reason for that is, as I said, is transparency, but also being able to do it remotely is a control of fees. You're able to do it at a more controlled price point, which for the customer, they're going to directly benefit for a lower cost of transaction.
So, I mean, Charles, what does one of these sort of typical new entrants look like? Obviously, they've reached scale quite quickly from what you say. I mean, are they effectively a kind of one-stop shop for buyer and seller, and I suppose leading from that, what is the opportunity then for the RICS surveyor to work with this new breed of digital conveyancer?
I mean, obviously there's an interface with the conveyancing sitting on both sides where their land registry searches. There are other things that plug into an API and have got to feed the information in and so forth. But truthfully, within the residential market, focusing on that for now, yeah, I mean, that is how we see it. I mean, the other side of that, of course, is that you do see the emergence of some digital estate agents, where in a way, because if you look at the transaction, how we look at it, you've got the conveyancing and you've got the estate agent. Now, if I'm a buyer or if I'm a seller, those are my two major interactions, with possibly the interaction of a mortgage broker, depending if you're taking a mortgage or not. So now you have the situation where you can see some estate agents are creating digital journeys and actually putting the conveyancing into the price of the property, or a price of an offering, should we say, that's made to the customer. There is the possibility of that, but generally speaking, you know, we do believe that the conveyancing digital journey is more of the party that's representing the seller and subsequently then representing the buyer. And you know, how do these dashboards look? Well, I mean, obviously they vary between the offering of each company, but generally speaking, it'll show, you'll have a sort of document vault, should we say, of all the documents that you want. You will have a pretty easy to use dashboard. You'll have a how-to, what you need to do, what you need to supply, but a pretty user-friendly kind of dashboard of, you need to supply these documents, we're going to do this, but in a friendly, easy way. So first-time buyers, no problem. They know what they're doing. It's not archaic. It's sort of made as a very consumer-friendly kind of offering. And then from that, you can have a sort of activity log, I think some of them have, where you're going to see the activity of what's going on, and you're going to get updates. You don't feel like, right, I've done my part, why has it been a month and I haven't heard anything? No, you're going to get updates from this company and kind of, you know, see right, we've received this, the seller's doing this,
Yeah.
and it's good, because what unnerves purchases and sales is lack of information. It's people generally, and this probably is not just for property, but actually just generally, and I think in most businesses that I've worked in, people don't mind, generally speaking, within a degree of things being delayed, but if they're kept informed, then that's a very different thing than being kind of shut out and wondering what's going on. And I think, the emergence of these companies and giving some things like an activity log is actually really useful for keeping the parties abreast of what's actually going on. And how do I
That's great.
see? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so on that basis, obviously you're connecting into this new breed of digital conveyancing, and as a result, providing value to the surveyors. Talk us through how you
Absolutely.
connect in, and then that value proposition for the surveyor.
Absolutely. So it obviously varies depending on the company, depending on their offering, depending on, there's one company that has a sort of list of add-on services that the customer might want, that we're listed as a sort of introducer or referral partner. But generally speaking, how we generally offer it is we build in an API. So within the customer's digital route, they will actively ask within the checklist of things to do, have you thought about a surveyor? Do you know, and then the follow-up question will be yes. If they go, yes, we've got a surveyor, the follow-up question might be, do you know that the mortgage valuation is not a survey? Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, no. And then they'll click, and then it's, look, we've got, referred partners where you can speak to a surveyor, as long as it's within working hours, we can generally get them we can get the quote to them probably within 30 seconds. And within that, we can get them on the phone within under 5 minutes with a surveyor of their choice. How do we see the interaction within surveying and surveyors within this marketplace? Well, obviously, I'm a believer in compare and contrast websites like ourselves, so that the customer within this gets a fair, should we say, market overview of pricing. So once they put their details in, they can see a range of pricing. That's obviously the benefit of, that's what Sidedoor, that's what we add that and the technology. So we build out an API that then plugs into the digital route within this. So under the umbrella of the conveyancing company, and sometimes it's co-branded, and sometimes it just says at the bottom Sidedoor. We're pretty flexible, quite truthfully. And truthfully, the key for us is quality, service, and that's actually the key parameters that we build ourselves on. We focus on award-winning surveying companies. We focus on quality. We focus on the ability to do a survey within a pretty narrow time field, so that we're not putting necessarily surveying options up that aren't able to do the work. So we sort of link that into our offering. So within that journey, the customer can fill in relatively simple details to get an indicative price quote within the site of the digital conveyancing, and then from that they can actually, well, they'll get a confirmation to their email site, but from that they can literally, we believe in control for both sides, both the surveyors and the customer. We believe in the fact that the surveyor doesn't like to be pestered, that they like compare companies like ourselves, but don't like, if there's multiple choices, to be pestered by those multiple choices until they've made a choice. We don't do that. We believe in the controllers in the customer's perspective, and actually our partners believe in that as well, because they don't want to have their customer, their digital customer, being pestered by a partner's list of companies that they've produced quotes for. So we put the control on the customer, and if they want to get in contact with one of our surveyors that they've got quotes on, they literally request a callback. So from our end, it also then helps our surveyors, because of course they, instead of being one of many quotes, they've been selected by that customer to get in contact with them, which immediately for them doesn't waste their time. They've got a customer who wants to speak to them on the phone. So that's how we see the interaction we see that obviously you can go the route, and obviously there is the organic traffic of, through Google, through the search engines, where the customer will look for a surveyor and they will Google their local area, they will look for a surveyor. But we actually see a better route to market, and a better route to market for business for our surveyors that we work with, in building relationships with linchpin parts of the mechanism, parts of the transaction that are 100% going to be there, otherwise the transaction can't take place. Because the journeys are now digital, there are very easy ways of building an API into that system and allow the customer in a very easy, friendly way to get informed very quickly and at least make a choice that they want to speak to a surveyor very quickly. They've obviously already got the trusted relationship by picking the conveyancing company. And then obviously from the conveyancing company, they have to do their due diligence of who they make relationships with. So similar to us, there are staples of quality that we've built our brand by, but we have to make sure we keep that to a level that the conveyancing companies are happy with. So their customers get the best quality, best service, and that nothing would come back on them, shall we say. So that they keep their customers happy. And we, to be honest, see this as a route to market for the surveyors. And truth be told, I mean, really the service is dramatically benefiting the customers that the conveyancing companies have. I mean, that's how it began. We were chatting with a lot of the conveyancing companies, and they get asked regularly, well, do I need a survey? What is a survey? And they either don't have a partner to refer it to, don't want to elect one partner only, because then they're reliant and possibly making a recommendation. So this is where the APIs, the technology for Sidedoor, we build it in, and therefore it then flows on to the surveyors directly. But this is definitely something in the last 2-3 years. Even back in 2016, it wasn't, the numbers and the digital journey was not in the way that it is now, sort of 4 or 5, cracky, that's 5 years later. But and we see this for RICS surveyors as being a different way from 5 years ago to acquire clients, customers, but we see it being a major part of how they would get clients in the future. Because these, sorry, go on.
So I was just going to say, I was really interested to pick up on, and it's something we're very aware of at RICS, your earlier point about, I think you mentioned 25% only get a physical survey done, and you mentioned that quite often these digital conveyancers will make the point that, quote, a mortgage valuation is not necessarily a survey. I mean, what else do you think we can do in this market to educate the consumer, not in a patronizing way, but make that point that actually, and I know it's a cliche, this is your biggest ever purchase, but that people spend an eye-watering amount of money in relative terms, given what they normally spend money on day to day on an asset like this, and still don't get that most basic survey done to understand, as ever, possible defects, how that might affect their decision, or indeed what they pay for it. I mean, what more do you think we can do to raise awareness of the importance of getting a survey now that digital appears to be an ever increasing way of doing it?
It's a tricky one, and the reason why I say that, there's no one silver bullet. And there's no one answer. From our perspective, we went down with lots of helpful advice, but the problem is that a lot of consumers during the purchase have a attention span, and this is everyone, including me, that they would not want to read a long documentation about each type of survey. And because there are different, let's call them their surveys, but product surveys in the market, to actually understand, okay, why do I need a survey? What is a survey? And then below that, understand what type of survey should I be getting? Actually, not everyone's built in the way that they're going to want to read through all of that jargon and get an understanding of what product suits them. What they do want is to, if they've got to that point, to then talk to a surveyor and get advice, from speaking to someone. And actually, well, that's what we've found pretty clear on Sidedoor. That a lot of our, and we can see a lot of our helpful document, we can see how many people go to them. And percentage it's very small, the more detailed ones. So, you need to, in a way, this is very subjective, and there will be people who will completely disagree. So from our perspective, it has to sit at that higher level. So, to the basic question of, why are people, without getting into the detail, people, and there's only 25% of people taking a property survey. Why is that? And definitely from our end, number one by far is the misunderstanding of valuation survey and a property survey. The amount of people that we have seen that do a valuation survey and actually think that someone has checked the house out and checked the condition out I was shocked. And it is high. So how could RICS help the consumer at least have the information available? So, because I'm always careful to word it in a way that, not in a patronizing way, but just have the information available so that they can see it, make a judged choice, and either go on from it or help talk to a surveyor, because that's the first crossing road for me. And obviously there is RICS direct, but if people, as the customer, didn't necessarily know who RICS are, and they're coming into it from the consumer perspective, I'm afraid I'm going to go back to the same drum on the same beat, which is, it's the staples within the property transaction. You've got the estate agents, you've got the mortgage brokers, and you've got the conveyancing companies. So these are the three kind of really serious pillars that people are going to interact with when they buy a property. So for me, there is pretty serious duty of responsibility, and obviously I'm coming at it from a surveying perspective, but I think, these are the largest purchases that people are going to be making in their lifetime. If they get things wrong, the costs can be far greater than they've ever imagined. I mean, I think, and again, this is probably a few years out of date, but I remember RICS coming out with, I think the average purchase, and I'm going to quote, I did write this down to make sure I worded it right. The average, I think 5,750 is spent on unexpected repair bills that could have been saved by a survey. And I think it's the three staples of how you interact that information to the customer, and I think it's the estate agents, which again, I'll probably get shot here for saying this, but I mean, it's a difficult one, because depending on the estate agents, there has a tendency, and I think the industry gets a bad rep, but and I think actually it is changing dramatically with the emergence of some really interesting estate agents that are developed on helping the customer understand what should be around. And I know a friend of mine runs, and again, I won't mention the company's name, but runs a really interesting company that has a pretty big UK presence, and they're all about helping the customers understand surveying, conveyancing built into the product that they're offering. Now, obviously, the difficulty for them is that, I remember we had a chat last year, and conveyancing you can do fixed pricing on. You cannot do fixed pricing. It's very difficult, shall we say, to do fixed pricing on surveying, because properties are very different, from different sizes to different ages and there's no set one price. Otherwise, it would be a lot easier, but there isn't. But I do feel that the estate agents are going to have to at some point, and a lot of them I think are beginning to, but give the right advice, or at least point their customers in the direction of where they can get the right advice from. And I think from that, maybe the customers can kind of realize that the bank valuation is not a real survey of the condition of the property. Now, on the other side of things, the other staple is, for most people, will be the bank. Either a mortgage broker or the bank. And again, I see them as a real staple of, that's how an education to the market. And at least, especially when you see the emergence of a lot of these new online mortgage brokers. So you've got companies like Trustline, Habita, and these are big companies now. And they are seeing good chunks of the marketplace. And again, because of the digital journey and a digital route, this can be built into those as well. And the same thing can happen there. The same thing with the conveyancing market. You know, it can be helping the customer understand, should I be getting a survey? What is a survey?
Mm.
And the same obviously on the conveyancing. And truthfully, that's how I see, you know, our RICS, the best way to get that number seriously up, and it should be,
Mm.
because, you know, there's no reason bar new builds or, you know, where people shouldn't at least be contemplating a survey for the property they're buying. And I think the best way in that is partnerships and relationships, because I think standing alone, and you can stand at the top of a building and people can shout as much as they want and put the messages out there, but unless people are searching for it, they won't find it. It won't just be organically flowing in front of them. So if you pick the parties and the relationships that people are going to have when buying property, they can supply the information from our ICS. So I see partnerships and information, and that's again bringing it kind of back round to really where we are now as a tech partner. That, you know, this I do see is with the emergence of more of these digital journeys, conveyancing, surveying, in respect to how Sidedoor is, estate agents, mortgage brokers, you know, this is where I think it can really dramatically change how people interact with a surveyor. But you've obviously got a different product in the fact that the best way is to jump them from that digital journey. I mean, this is how we see it, very quickly onto a phone call, because in the end, the customer is going to want to speak to someone who's qualified. It's great seeing the information online, but the best way for both parties is to get on the phone and have a conversation. So,
Yeah, no,
you know,
sorry, I was going to say that
no, go
I
on,
think
that was it.
it's that great blend of tech and digital journey, but you still need people, you still need professional advice, and it's
Absolutely.
how that journey dips in and out. I guess to finish, I'm intrigued that on the one level, clearly this concept of digital conveyancing has got huge momentum, and you mentioned, you know, even single actors in this space are getting significant shares of the market. And we did touch on the fact that, you know, certain people I know will want to continue a traditional way, but
Mm.
are there any particular barriers to this growth? Just as a last question to you, are there any particular barriers to this growth in digital conveyancing, or do you think it's still got a long way to run in terms of overall market share and adoption?
I mean, again, this is very subjective, and
Yeah.
there is, and to go back on what you're saying, absolutely, there is a case and presence, and there always will be, for that personal relationships,
Mm.
and that will never disappear. And I don't necessarily mean in this industry, I mean in almost any,
Mm.
from you see it in, you know, anything from estate agents to buying cars to banking. You can see the different banks, how, you know, let's pick, you've got banks such as Handelsbanken going back into the more traditional banking of having small branches everywhere,
Yeah, the
where you
church
ring,
spire type approach. Yeah.
absolutely, and you ring up and you've got the direct number for your banker Andrew, both on a commercial sense and on a personal sense. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where you've got, you know, metro banking. You've got the emergence of really new, actually, to be fair, metro banking do have branches, but you've got the emergence of online banking as well. So I think there will always be a place for all different types of services, because clients and people are different. However, I do think for has digital conveyancing got further to go? Absolutely, 100%. We're adamant. And a lot of it for us comes down to, you know, when you look at the wait times on property transactions of what is holding it up, and we were talking earlier about the land registry and searches, and well, the emergence of a digital journey, all of this digitalization of the industry really speeds it up. So in the end of the day, what the consumer wants is a speedier, quicker, more transparent journey. And I think by that, you're going to create less failed sales or failed
Mm.
purchases. And that is the reason really why you can see the growth of these digital conveyancing companies. I mean, there will be a plateau. There always is in every
Mm.
industry. There's only
Yeah.
100% of the market, and you're not going to, you know, you're
Yeah.
not going
You're
to
not
get
going to
more than
capture it
that.
all. Yeah.
No, no, and that's the truth. So has it got a lot further to go? Yes, absolutely. And you can see that also as I mentioned earlier in the mortgage broking side of things, and that could be a topic maybe for another call. But I mean, you can see in but 5 years the emergence of digital mortgage brokers that didn't exist 4 years ago, didn't exist at all. And you can really see that the chunks of market, and it's because it's more transparent. You can then allow industries such as ourselves and conveyancing all to plug in, and it makes it a lot easier for the flow of information to go between these parties. And you've got the other fact that as we all get older, the younger generation have grown up on this as bread and butter, and they feel more at home using a digital dashboard than they do picking up the phone.
Exactly.
And that does mean in the future they feel more at home by doing this. And as they become first-time buyers and so forth, they feel more at home doing it this route than the older route that the way we used to do it. So I think it will become the bulk of the marketplace, and that's I'll wait to see if I'm right or wrong, but I think it already is dramatically growing in numbers, and you can see it. So the answer is, I think it's got a long way to go. It will have a plateau. However, for the industry, I see it as a real advantage, because I think it will benefit surveyors, the consumer, and every party, truthfully.
Well, it's hopefully a win-win. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Charles. And I know we'll be catching up again on another episode where we can look at your platform in more detail and talk about these interesting issues. Because, as I say, being involved with land registry and digital street and other kind of things that are going on around digital IDs and qualified electronic signatures, this area of digital conveyancing is only going to get smoother and hopefully better for all concerned. So thanks ever so much. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to us talking again in the next episode.
See you next time. Thank you.
Cheers, Charles. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.